Imagine an entire galaxy teetering on the brink of war. For centuries, civilizations have fought for dominance, each rising and falling with their own military power. In this vast expanse of the universe, the stakes are high, the conflicts endless, and survival often is a matter of sheer strength. But what if just one ship, one human warship, could change the fate of a galaxy? What if a single vessel, built by humans with unparalleled ingenuity and relentless determination, could halt an invasion and alter the course of history? It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, doesn't it? But this isn't a fantasy. This is exactly what happened during the early years of humanity's rise on the galactic stage. A galaxy filled with advanced civilizations that had spent eons perfecting their war tactics, technologies, and strategies met an unexpected force they could never have predicted: humans. The story we're about to explore isn't just about one ship. It's about the unimaginable power of human resourcefulness and innovation. It's about how a species, barely a blip in the grand scheme of galactic history, proved that even the most daunting threats could be overcome when faced with the power of human resolve and the courage to fight back. But how did this one ship manage to scare off an entire fleet? An invasion force so powerful that many in the galaxy believed it would dominate everything in its path. What made this human creation so fearsome that the aliens retreated without firing a single shot? The answer isn't just in the ship itself. It lies in the very core of what makes humanity unique: our ingenuity, adaptability, and our drive to survive. Let's backtrack a bit to understand just how vulnerable humanity was at the time. The year is 2400 AD, and humanity had just taken its first steps into the cosmos. We had barely made it past the moon and established our first colonies on Mars when our star system began to attract the attention of alien civilizations. Some of these species viewed us as a species worth cultivating, an emerging, inquisitive race with the potential to add to the vast tapestry of the universe's civilizations. Others, however, saw us as nothing more than a nuisance, a threat, to their status as the dominant powers of the galaxy. After all, they had spent millennia carving out their empires, while we were just starting to make our mark. Among those who viewed humanity with suspicion were the Falkor, a militaristic race whose empire stretched across vast sectors of the galaxy. They had a reputation for being relentless conquerors, using their superior military technology and tactics to assimilate entire civilizations. When they first detected humanity's expansion beyond the solar system, they saw it as a potential threat to their dominance, a burgeoning power they couldn't afford to ignore. The Falkor decided to launch an invasion. Their fleet, composed of hundreds of heavily armed ships, was on a direct course for Earth. It wasn't just a military strike, it was an extinction-level event for humanity. They believed that by neutralizing our home planet and our space infrastructure, we would be wiped out, leaving the galaxy to their rule. The Falkor were confident in their victory, certain that no one, especially a fledgling species like humanity, could stand against them. But they severely underestimated us. Here's where the story of the warship begins. Humanity's greatest asset in the conflict wasn't an army or a fleet of ships. It was a single, powerful warship, a vessel designed specifically to counter galactic threats like the Falkor. It was unlike any warship the galaxy had ever seen before. Its name? The Icarus. The Icarus was humanity's shining achievement in warship design. Built using the most advanced technology humanity had at the time: fusion engines, electromagnetic, shielding, and cutting-edge weaponry. It was a marvel of engineering. But what made the Icarus truly unique wasn't just its size or its firepower, it was its purpose. The Icarus was designed with a singular focus: adaptability. While most alien fleets were built for raw power and destructive force, the Icarus was a ship built to outthink and outmaneuver its enemies. It had an experimental AI system capable of predicting enemy movements and counteracting tactics in real time. Its weapons were designed to be highly efficient, with the ability to be reconfigured based on the situation at hand. The Icarus wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of human determination and strategic brilliance. But would it be enough to hold back an invasion force that outnumbered it by hundreds? Could one ship really make the difference in a galactic war? Before we answer that, let's take a moment to reflect on humanity's resilience. History is filled with examples of us overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Whether it was our early struggles on Earth, our battle for survival during the Cold War, or even our more recent achievements in space exploration, humans have always found a way to rise to the occasion. This was no different. The Icarus wasn't just a ship. It was the embodiment of the human spirit. It was a message to the galaxy that humanity wouldn't back down, that we wouldn't just survive, we would thrive. Now, as the Falkor fleet approached Earth, the stage was set for a showdown. And it wasn't going to be a conventional battle. This wouldn't be decided by firepower alone. It was going to be a test of will, a test of strategy, and it was going to be decided by one ship. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. And so, the countdown to the invasion began, but the Falkor had no idea what was waiting for them. As the Falkor fleet made its way toward Earth, humanity watched with bated breath. It was the kind of moment that defined civilizations. A moment where the very survival of a species was at stake. Governments and military leaders were in chaos, scrambling to assemble their forces, trying to come up with a strategy that could possibly hold off an enemy force that outnumbered them by such a vast margin. But amid the panic, one truth stood clear. Humanity had a single ship that could stand against the Falkor fleet, the Icarus. It was a massive vessel, a behemoth of metal and technology. But it wasn't just its physical size that made it formidable. What set the Icarus apart was its innovative design, which gave it the ability to outperform the most advanced alien warships in a way no one had ever expected. In the face of overwhelming odds, it had been built to give humanity an edge in the most crucial of all battles, the fight for survival. The Icarus wasn't just another battleship. It wasn't part of a massive armada of ships designed to overwhelm enemies with sheer force. Instead, it was an intricately crafted war machine, built with the philosophy of maximizing adaptability over brute strength. It was equipped with cutting-edge AI systems, which were a game-changer. The AI didn't just coordinate the ship's systems. It could anticipate the Falkor fleet's strategies before they even knew they were forming them. This level of foresight was unheard of in the galaxy, where most military strategies revolved around sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower. The Icarus's weapon systems were state-of-the-art, designed with versatility in mind. Unlike the Falkor, who relied on heavy conventional weapons like plasma cannons and antimatter bombs, the Icarus carried modular weaponry. It could deploy devastating energy beams that could cut through the toughest shields, but it also had the ability to deploy smaller, more precise weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them, an ability that would prove crucial in the upcoming confrontation. But perhaps the most crucial part of the Icarus was its adaptability in combat. It wasn't simply about how much power it had. It was about how quickly it could adapt to any situation, how it could think on its feet in a way that other warships, alien or human, couldn't. This was key when dealing with a fleet as massive and powerful as the Falkors. The Icarus wasn't going to just fight them head-on. It was going to outthink them. The Falkor, for all their might, were creatures of habit. They had fought wars for millennia, using similar tactics over and over again, relying on their overwhelming firepower to crush any enemy in their path. Their fleets moved in formations designed to maximize their firepower while minimizing their weaknesses. They had never encountered a foe like humanity before, a species that was just starting to grasp the enormity of space combat, but possessed a fierce and unrelenting will to survive. As the Falkor fleet approached Earth, their commanders were confident that this would be another easy conquest. They expected to engage in a standard battle, overwhelming numbers, devastating firepower, and an almost automatic victory. They never even considered the possibility of a counterattack from a single human warship. They couldn't fathom that one ship, powered by human ingenuity and adaptability, could stand in their way. The first signs of the approaching battle came when the Falkor ships entered Earth's outer defense perimeter. It was a tense moment. The Icarus had been stationed on Earth's defense line, ready for anything. But no one truly knew what to expect. Would the Falkor fleet launch a full-scale attack immediately, or would they try to intimidate humanity first? Every moment of the countdown felt like an eternity. In the midst of this, The commander of the Icarus, Captain Elias Morgan, stood at the helm of the ship. A seasoned military leader, Captain Morgan had led many campaigns in humanity's early UA space missions, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. As he gazed out of the Icarus's command bridge, he knew that his mission wasn't just about military strategy, it was about survival. "Prepare to engage," Morgan ordered, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. His crew had trained for this day, but the reality of the situation was different. There was no backup fleet, there was no reinforcements. The Icarus was humanity's last stand. As the Falkor ships neared, they began to form their usual battle formations. Their ships, sleek and menacing, filled the outer orbit. Each one was a powerhouse, capable of unleashing destruction on a planetary scale. And yet, even as they closed in on Earth, the Falkor commanders were unaware of the force they were about to face. The Icarus moved into position, using the tactics it had been designed for: hit and run, outmaneuvering the enemy, staying one step ahead. The crew on board was trained for this. Every officer, every technician knew exactly what needed to be done. But there was one thing they didn't account for: the sheer unpredictability of the human spirit. The Icarus didn't just launch a barrage of weapons like a traditional fleet would. Instead, it started with subtlety. The first engagement was small, an invisible EMP pulse, launched from the Icarus and targeted directly at the lead Falkor ship. The result was immediate and staggering. The Falkor ship's shields flickered, briefly incapacitated by the electromagnetic pulse, leaving it vulnerable to further attacks. It was a tactical masterstroke. The Falkor fleet, so accustomed to their own tactics, had no idea how to react. They had never encountered such an unconventional form of warfare, and it threw them into disarray. But it was only the beginning. The Icarus wasn't done yet. It continued to outmaneuver the Falkor fleet with calculated precision, striking only when necessary, using minimal energy to conserve its resources. The Falkor were becoming desperate, their once confident fleet now scrambling to counter the unpredictable attacks. They had underestimated humanity. And as the Icarus remained a ghost in the dark void of space, the Falkor commanders began to question whether they could win this battle at all. As the Falkor fleet stumbled through the chaos created by the Icarus, the humans on board the warship were already preparing for the next phase of their counterattack. The element of surprise had worked, but Captain Elias Morgan knew the fight was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Falkor were a proud species, and they would learn quickly. They were no strangers to battle, and now they were beginning to adapt to humanity's unconventional tactics. The Icarus continued to engage with precision, utilizing its unparalleled adaptability. Each move, each decision, was calculated to create maximum disruption while minimizing risk. The Falkor fleet, though formidable, was not used to such fluidity. The humans aboard the Icarus had not only created a ship with superior technology, they had created a ship that could think faster, adjust on the fly, and outmaneuver even the most powerful of fleets. Meanwhile, the Falkor commanders realized they had made a grave mistake. Their previous victories had come easily, always relying on overwhelming firepower and numbers. But now they were up against something different. A human warship that fought with intellect and precision rather than brute force. In the Falkor strategy manual, there was no mention of an adversary like this. Desperation began to set in among the Falkor leaders as they started to regroup their forces. They called for reinforcements, but it was clear the situation was slipping away from them. Every time they thought they had an advantage, the Icarus would vanish, only to strike again from a different angle. The humans had turned the very concept of space warfare on its head. At the heart of the Icarus's operation was its artificial intelligence, named Astra. Astra wasn't just any computer program. She was a masterpiece of human engineering, designed to be as intuitive as she was intelligent. She could analyze combat data faster than any human mind, making real-time decisions based on patterns, probabilities, and calculations. But what truly set Astra apart was her ability to learn and evolve in the midst of battle. She could even predict the movements of enemy fleets with terrifying accuracy, giving the Icarus an almost supernatural advantage. When Astra first engaged the Falkor fleet, she didn't just target their ships with weapons. Instead, she began to map out the fleet's entire structure, studying each vessel, its capabilities, its weaknesses. Astra learned fast, identifying patterns and flaws in the Falkor strategy that the invaders hadn't even noticed themselves. It was as though Astra could read their every move before they made it. And so, Astra began to play her own kind of game. The Icarus became a ghost in space, darting in and out of the shadows of the Falkor armada, attacking where the enemy least expected. The crew of the Icarus worked in perfect harmony with the AI, their efforts enhanced by the machine's precision. They weren't just fighting the Falkor, they were outthinking them at every turn. The tide of the battle slowly began to turn in humanity's favor. The Falkor, who had once believed their overwhelming numbers would crush humanity in a matter of hours, were now on the defensive. The Icarus kept up a constant pressure, refusing to let the invaders regroup. It wasn't about destroying the entire fleet in one strike. It was about whittling them down, dismantling their ability to fight, and forcing them into a position of vulnerability. But the Falkor weren't ready to give up just yet. Realizing that brute force would not win, they began to resort to more unorthodox strategies of their own. They attempted to corner the Icarus, setting traps and using decoys to confuse the human warship. For every tactic the Falkor threw at the Icarus, Astra was already one step ahead. She predicted their moves, countered their traps, and found the smallest weaknesses in their formation to exploit. The Icarus's ability to change tactics on the fly became its greatest asset. As the battle raged on, the crew discovered just how well Astra could operate under pressure. She could alter the ship's weapons configuration mid-battle, adjusting the power of its energy beams, shifting from long-range bombardment to pinpoint precision in an instant. It was like fighting with a mind that was constantly adapting to the circumstances, learning from every move the enemy made. This wasn't the cold, mechanical AI of old warships. It was a symbiotic partnership between man and machine. Captain Morgan and his crew began to realize that this battle wasn't just about survival. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was not just a fledgling species, it was a force to be reckoned with. As the Falkor fleet began to falter under the relentless pressure of the Icarus, the humans aboard that warship weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity itself. But even in the midst of this victory, there was a lingering uncertainty. The Falkor had underestimated humanity before, and now they were realizing just how much they had miscalculated. But could one human warship really hold the line against an entire armada of alien invaders? Could the Icarus stand strong long enough to turn the tide of this war? As the Falkor fleet began to disband, their commanders reevaluated their strategy. Was it time to call for reinforcements, or had they already lost the war? The battle was far from over, but humanity's chances of survival had just grown exponentially. As the Icarus pressed forward, now targeting Falkor ship after Falkor ship, the invaders realized that humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated. The war had only just begun, but the Icarus was the spark that would ignite a fire in the hearts of humankind, and that fire would be the key to their survival. As the battle progressed, the Falkor fleet's morale began to deteriorate. Once confident in their overwhelming superiority, they were now being dismantled piece by a single human warship. It wasn't just the Icarus's capabilities that unnerved them. It was the realization that this warship was not fighting like any conventional military vessel. It wasn't just a tool of destruction. It was a symbol of human resilience, intelligence, and unity. But for the crew aboard the Icarus, this was just the beginning. They understood that while the tide had turned in their favor, there was still much to be done. The Falkor may have underestimated humanity's ingenuity, but they would soon learn that the Icarus was not invincible. Every victory had its cost, and the next phase of the battle was about to reveal a new level of danger, one that no one aboard the Icarus had fully anticipated. Captain Elias Morgan sat in the command center, his eyes scanning the myriad of screens in front of him. The intensity of the battle was palpable. Every second counted. The Falkor were retreating, but they weren't defeated yet. Their fleet was broken, but their fighters and warships were scattered across the battlefield, desperate to regroup and take one last stand. The Icarus had done what no one thought possible. It had neutralized the bulk of the Falkor's initial wave, but there was still an enemy to face. "Captain," Lieutenant Ana Perez said, her voice tense, "we've detected a new fleet formation coming out of Falkor space. It's massive, something they've been hiding until now." The scouts didn't detect it until it was almost too late. They're coming fast. The realization hit Captain Morgan like a cold wave. The Falkor were not done. They had been hiding their trump card for this very moment. A secondary fleet, larger, more heavily armed, and better coordinated than the first wave, was about to engage them in full force. "Astra," Captain Morgan said, his voice steady. "Prepare for combat." Astra's calm, analytical voice responded in an instant. "Understood, Captain. I've already calculated the best course of action. Shall we initiate evasive maneuvers?" "No," Captain Morgan replied, the corner of his mouth curling into a grim smile. "It's time we finish what we started. All weapons ready. Let's give them a real human welcome." The Icarus had taken a beating during the battle, but it was far from helpless. Every shot it fired, every evasive maneuver it made, was calculated down to the finest detail. The Falkor's secondary fleet was larger, yes, but they had been lured into a trap. The Icarus had drawn them in, spread them out, and now it was time to strike. The secondary fleet emerged from a nearby nebula, their ships sleek and formidable, but the Icarus was ready. Astra's algorithms had already mapped their movements, predicted their strategies, and devised countermeasures. The Falkor fleet might have had the numbers, but they were not prepared for the kind of warfare humanity was bringing to the table. The Falkor's strategy was simple: overwhelm the enemy with sheer force. They deployed their most powerful ships first, leading the charge in an attempt to break through the human lines. But the Icarus didn't just stand and fight, it danced. It weaved through the enemy formation, its shields absorbing damage while Astra's targeting systems locked onto the weakest points of the Falkor vessels. Lieutenant Ana Perez, who had grown accustomed to the harrowing nature of battle, was now focused entirely on the weapons systems. "Captain, we've got a direct hit on their lead ship. Shields are weakening. Target their engines. We can cripple their advance." "Do it," Morgan commanded. Within seconds, the Icarus fired a concentrated burst of plasma energy. The lead Falkor ship erupted in a burst of light, its engines incapacitated, leaving it floating helplessly in space. The Icarus immediately shifted focus, now targeting the next ship in line. The Falkor were realizing that they had misjudged the scale of this confrontation. Humanity didn't rely on brute strength alone. They fought with strategy, with precision, and with relentless ingenuity. As the battle continued, Astra worked tirelessly to outthink the Falkor commanders, reading every movement, predicting every shift in their strategy. Each attack from the Icarus was designed to disorient, confuse, and destroy. The Falkor, now facing a warship that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once, began to lose their confidence. They had no room to breathe, no chance to regroup. The more they fought, the more it felt like they were being swallowed up by the Icarus's relentless assault. But there was one thing the Icarus could not anticipate: the Falkor's desperation. As the battle raged on, one last ace in the hole was revealed. The Falkor had a secret weapon of their own, an experimental superweapon, capable of unleashing a devastating energy blast strong enough to wipe out entire fleets. It was still in the early stages of testing, but in their panic, the Falkor decided to use it as a last-ditch effort to stop the human warship. As the Icarus closed in on the final phase of the battle, a massive energy surge erupted from one of the remaining Falkor vessels. The blast was directed straight at the Icarus, its intensity unlike anything the ship had faced before. The crew braced for impact as the beam cut through space like a knife through butter. The shields flared brightly in defense, but the power of the blast was overwhelming. The Icarus staggered under the onslaught. "Brace for impact!" Morgan shouted, his voice filled with urgency. The Icarus's hull groaned as the energy blast collided with its shields, cracking the surface of the ship. For a moment, the crew feared the worst. But Astra's voice came through. Once again, steady and unwavering. "Captain, shields at 70%. We are still operational. Redirecting power to secondary systems to stabilize." It was a close call, but humanity's determination was not easily broken. The Falkor had shown their hand, and the humans had absorbed the blow. Now the final blow was about to be delivered. Captain Morgan's resolve hardened. "All units, prepare to launch a final assault. Let's show them what humanity is capable of." The Icarus had weathered the worst the Falkor could throw at it. Now, with their experimental superweapon failed, the Falkor found themselves staring down the last human warship standing. What they had believed to be a decisive weapon had only delayed the inevitable. The Falkor, accustomed to facing fleets of overwhelming power, were now caught in a deadly game of attrition, a game they were ill-equipped to win. The crew of the Icarus was battle-hardened, but the damage they had taken was significant. The ship's outer hull was pockmarked with the scars of laser fire, and some internal systems were beginning to fail under the stress of the constant engagement. Yet, as always, the human spirit endured. Captain Morgan surveyed the damage reports, his face set in grim determination. The Falkor fleet was on the brink of collapse, but so was the Icarus. "This ends now," Morgan muttered to himself. Ana Perez stood beside him, studying the holographic display. The Falkor ships were now scattered, their formations shattered by the Icarus's relentless assault. But there were still a handful of them left, and those ships were more dangerous than ever. It was clear the Falkor had underestimated humanity's resilience, but now the human ship was about to push forward one final time, armed with a terrifying secret of its own. "We've lost communication with our allies, Captain," Lieutenant Perez reported. "It's just us against them now. The remaining Falkor ships are regrouping, but we can outmaneuver them." "Can we outfight them?" Captain Morgan asked, his voice edged with an almost mechanical calm. "We can," Perez said, her voice brimming with conviction. "But we have to take out their command vessel first. Without it, the Falkor won't be able to organize effectively. We're running out of time, sir." Captain Morgan nodded. Time was the one thing they didn't have in abundance. The Icarus was battered, the crew exhausted, and the Falkor, although cornered, were still formidable. He turned to Astra. "Astra, calculate our optimal course of action. We take out their command ship. Now." "Calculating," Astra replied, her voice unwavering. Within seconds, the star charts flashed across the screen as the AI processed every possible scenario. "I have a solution. I recommend initiating a surprise attack using the debris field ahead. We can use it as cover to close the distance before they can react." Morgan didn't hesitate. "Do it. All systems go." The Icarus lurched into motion. The crew braced for the final assault, their fingers gripping consoles, their eyes locked on their stations. Astra's calculation had been precise. The debris field, left over from previous skirmishes, provided a perfect shield. The Falkor had no idea that the Icarus was about to launch from this cover with devastating force. The human warship was about to perform a maneuver so daring it would leave the Falkor scrambling to understand what had just happened. As the Icarus navigated the field of broken ships and space wreckage, the Falkor remained focused on their remaining forces, underestimating the Icarus's true capabilities. The silence on the bridge was deafening. Every crew member knew that the next move would decide the fate of the battle. With a single decisive strike, the Icarus could break the back of the Falkor's resistance. With less than a minute before closing the distance, the Falkor fleet noticed the approach. However, it was too late. The Icarus shot out of the debris like a phantom, its energy weapons primed. A barrage of fire ripped through the empty space between the two forces, tearing apart the nearest Falkor ships. But Morgan wasn't interested in destroying every last ship. He had a single target in mind: the Falkor command vessel. Its destruction would signal the end of the conflict, ensuring humanity's dominance in this region of space. The Icarus's energy cannons flared to life, unleashing a concentrated shot at the heart of the Falkor command ship. The Falkor ship retaliated, firing its own weapons, but the Icarus was too quick. In one fluid motion, the human warship sidestepped the attack and hit the Falkor vessel with a pinpoint strike. At its reactor core, the ship's shields failed instantly, and in the blink of an eye, the core exploded. A massive fireball rippled through the vacuum of space. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Falkor fleet collapsed. Without their command vessel, the Falkor lost all coordination. The remaining ships, now leaderless, scattered in every direction, some retreating, others too disoriented to even flee. Captain Morgan watched as the once mighty Falkor fleet disintegrated before his eyes. The battle was over. Against all odds, humanity had won. "Well done, everyone," Captain Morgan said, his voice soft but filled with pride. "You did it." The crew, though weary, broke into cheers. There was no celebration yet. They had won, but there was still much to do. The Falkor threat had been neutralized, but the Icarus was still stranded in hostile space, and the larger war was far from over. "We did it," Lieutenant Perez said, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "But there's more out there, isn't there?" Morgan nodded grimly. "Yes, the Falkor may be done for now, but this galaxy is full of threats. And humanity has just made its mark." The Icarus had completed its mission, but the story of humanity's rise was far from over. The final explosion of the Falkor command ship marked a decisive victory, but Captain Morgan knew that the battle against the galaxy's threats was only beginning. As the Icarus drifted through the void, its hull scarred and systems barely functional, there was a palpable sense of uncertainty. The crew had proved they were capable of miracles, but now they had to navigate the consequences of their actions. The Falkor were not the only powerful force in the galaxy, and their defeat could be seen as an invitation for other enemies to rise to the challenge. "Captain," Ana Perez spoke, her voice laced with caution as she stared at the data streaming across the main display. "We've received a transmission, encrypted, but it's coming from multiple systems in this region." Morgan frowned. "It's too soon. The Falkor would not have had time to alert others. Unless someone else saw what happened and is already coming to investigate," Perez finished for him. The captain stared out into the endless blackness of space. The Falkor may have been destroyed, but they were just one species in a galaxy teeming with others. Humanity's bold display of power might attract more attention than they had anticipated. The Icarus was already low on resources, the crew exhausted, and the threat of further invasion looming. "Prepare a response," Morgan ordered. "We need to know who we're dealing with." A few tense moments passed before the encrypted message was decrypted, and a face appeared on the holoscreen. It was an alien, humanoid, but unlike any species the crew had encountered before. The alien's skin was a deep shade of violet, and their eyes gleamed with intelligence and curiosity. They wore a dark, ornate uniform adorned with symbols that no one on the crew recognized. But what stood out most was the tone in the alien's voice. "Humanity," the alien began, its voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. "We are the Vysoth, the ones who have watched you, studied your rise, and noted your victory. But your actions, they have not gone unnoticed." Morgan's hand clenched into a fist as he listened. "And what does that mean?" "It means you've made an impression," the Vysoth continued, their expression unreadable. "And it also means that your warship's actions have now placed humanity in a dangerous position. The Falkor were merely pawns, and you have eliminated them, but the Vysoth are not so easily defeated." A tense silence filled the room, as the implications of the Vysoth's message sank in. This was no mere threat. It was a declaration. The galaxy was about to be pulled into a far larger conflict than anyone had anticipated. Captain Morgan took a deep breath, his mind racing. "We're not looking for trouble, but we're not afraid to defend ourselves either." The Vysoth's lips curved upward, a hint of a smile, though it was far from friendly. "That is good to hear, Captain. But do not mistake your victory for the end. The galaxy is full of predators, and now, humanity is no longer invisible." With that, the transmission ended. The crew was left in stunned silence. The Vysoth, it seemed, were only the beginning. Humanity had thrust itself into the spotlight, and now the galaxy was taking notice. The days of hiding in the shadows were over. The Icarus had completed its mission. But the story of humanity's rise was far from over. The final explosion of the Falkor command ship marked a decisive victory. But Captain Morgan knew that the battle against the galaxy's threats was only beginning. As the Icarus drifted through the void, its hull scarred and systems barely functional, there was a palpable sense of uncertainty. The crew had proved they were capable of miracles, but now they had to navigate the consequences of their actions. The Falkor were not the only powerful force in the galaxy, and their defeat could be seen as an invitation for other enemies to rise to the challenge. "Captain," Ana Perez spoke, her voice laced with caution as she stared at the data streaming across the main display. "We've received a transmission, encrypted, but it's coming from multiple systems in this region." Morgan frowned. It's too soon. The Falcor would not have had time to alert others. Unless someone else saw what happened and is already coming to investigate, Perez finished for him. The captain stared out into the endless blackness of space. The Falcor may have been destroyed, but they were just one species in a galaxy teeming with others. Humanity's bold display of power might attract more attention than they had anticipated. The Icarus was already low on resources, the crew exhausted, and the threat of further invasion looming. "Prepare a response," Morgan ordered. "We need to know who we're dealing with." A few tense moments passed before the encrypted message was decrypted and a face appeared on the holoscreen. It was an alien, humanoid, but unlike any species the crew had encountered before. The alien's skin was a deep shade of violet, and their eyes gleamed with intelligence and curiosity. They wore a dark, ornate uniform adorned with symbols that no one on the crew recognized. But what stood out most was the tone in the alien's voice. "Humanity," the alien began, its voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. "We are the Vysoth, the ones who have watched you, studied your rise, and noted your victory. But your actions, they have not gone unnoticed." Morgan's hand clenched into a fist as he listened. "And what does that mean?" "It means you've made an impression," the Vysoth continued, their expression unreadable. "And it also means that your warship's actions have now placed humanity in a dangerous position. The Falcor were merely pawns, and you have eliminated them. But the Vysoth are not so easily defeated." A tense silence filled the room as the implications of the Vysoth's message sank in. This was no mere threat. It was a declaration. Galaxy was about to be pulled into a far larger conflict than anyone had anticipated. Captain Morgan took a deep breath, his mind racing. "We're not looking for trouble, but we're not afraid to defend ourselves either." The Vysoth's lips curved upward, a hint of a smile, though it was far from friendly. "That is good to hear, Captain. But do not mistake your victory for the end. The galaxy is full of predators, and now, humanity is no longer invisible." With that, the transmission ended. The crew was left in stunned silence. The Vysoth, it seemed, were only the beginning. Humanity had thrust itself into the spotlight, and now the galaxy was taking notice. The days of hiding in the shadows were over. "We need to make sure the Icarus is ready," Morgan said, his voice low but filled with determination. "This is only the beginning." Ana Perez nodded. "We've got repairs to make, and we're low on supplies, but we'll make it work. We always do." "Prepare for whatever comes next," Morgan ordered. "The Falcor were just the first test. We've shown that we can fight, and that we can win. But the Vysoth are watching, and they're not the only ones." As the crew scrambled to repair the ship and resupply, the weight of their situation became clear. They had defeated the Falcor, but the galaxy was a vast and unpredictable place. The Icarus was the last bastion of humanity in an alien-dominated galaxy, and its crew was about to find out just how deep the danger ran. As the Icarus turned its engines toward the stars once more, Captain Morgan couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The battle for humanity's survival had only just begun. There were countless forces in the universe, some more powerful, more ancient, and far more dangerous than they could imagine. The Icarus would not be the last to face them, but it had the opportunity to lead the charge. Every great journey begins with a single step, Morgan thought, and humanity's first step into the galaxy has already made an impact. The Icarus was ready to face whatever came next. But the real question remained. Could humanity stand against the galaxy's greatest predators? Only time would tell. If you've enjoyed this incredible journey and want to see how humanity's story unfolds in the stars, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join us on this epic adventure. Like, share, and comment to let us know what you think. What's next for humanity's place in the galaxy? We want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring the unknown with us, because this story has only just begun.